Hi guys, my name is Jamie Melendez, and this is the first video for my new series, Cult Classics and Kool-Aid, where I'll be talking about different cult classic films and why they were a flop and how eventually they gained a cult following. I will also be letting you guys know at the end of the video whether I drank the Kool-Aid or not, meaning if I like the movie or not. So please sit back, relax, grab a snack, and let's get started.
TriStar Pictures announces the collaboration of three extraordinary talents. Jim Henson, creator of The Muppets and Dark Crystal.
Where you go with a head like that?
George Lucas, creator of the Star Wars saga. And one of the most innovative forces in modern entertainment, David Bowie. Together, they will take you into a dazzling world of fantasy and adventure.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
A world where anything seems possible, and nothing is what it seems.
Everything I've done for you. I move the stars for no one.
Here we are.
Run so long, run so far.
The world of Labyrinth.
So, I will be covering the whole entire film, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, then this is your spoiler warning, and I will suggest that you guys stop the video, go watch the film, and hopefully come back. So, without further ado, let's get started. Was created in 1986, directed by Jim Henson. So, it takes place with, or starts off with Sarah, 16-year-old girl. She doesn't have many friends. She likes to play in a fantasy land. She's out in a park performing a monologue from a book called The Labyrinth. So she's kind of bratty, but obviously dealing with issues with her stepmom and new baby brother. I mean, as many teenagers would. She gets asked to babysit her little brother named Toby. So Sarah gets even more upset when she finds one of her favorite stuffed bears named Lancelot in Toby's crib. And Toby won't stop crying, and in a moment of frustration and theatrics, Sarah asks or wishes for Toby to be taken away. Seconds later, the baby stops crying, and Toby is missing from his crib. Then, the Goblin King, also known as Jareth, arrives, and gives Sarah 13 hours to find Toby in the labyrinth before he becomes a goblin too. Sarah starts searching through the labyrinth and runs into a dwarf named Hoggle. Hoggle warns Sarah about the dangers within the labyrinth. They eventually go their separate ways. We then get one of the most iconic scenes from this movie, which is Dance Magic Dance. And this happens when Jareth, through a crystal ball, is watching Sarah struggle through the labyrinth and is feeling pretty confident that he's going to be able to keep Toby.
23 minutes. You'll be mine.
Left my baby blue. Nobody knew what kind of magic spell to use.
Slime and snails on puppy dog's tail. Thunder boy lighted and baby said,
Dance, magic dance, magic dance, magic dance, magic dance. Let's make it jump, magic jump, magic jump, magic jump, magic jump, magic jump on me. Slap that baby, make him pray.
Next, Sarah is talking to creatures guarding two doors. The one she decides to go through leads her to fall down and runs into Hoggle again, where he offers to help her go through the labyrinth as far as he can in exchange for her bracelet. Jareth suspects Hoggle is helping Sarah, so to throw them off even more, he shortens the time to find Toby and sends a rolling knife-type contraption towards them. But Sarah and Hoggle are able to escape. Then we get an awkward scene with Hoggle and Jareth's crotch. Later, Sarah and Hoggle hear some roaring, so Hoggle runs off in fear. We eventually find Ludo, a beast that is being attacked by soldiers. Sarah throws a rock at them and helps get Ludo down. They eventually call each other friends after this. Next, they run into another set of doors. The one Sarah chooses to go to leads her to a forest where Ludo falls into a hole. Hoggle is tempted to help Sarah after hearing Sarah calling for help, but Jareth once again appears to Hoggle. Suspicious that he's trying to help Sarah, Jareth gives Hoggle a peach to offer to Sarah. Hoggle is of course hesitant at first, but doesn't want to be sent to the Bog of Eternal Stench. And in case you guys are wondering what the Bog of Eternal Stench is, it's basically a giant farting, burping lake that if you were to fall into it, you will smell horrible forever. So I don't blame Hoggle for not wanting to be sent there. Next, we get another song, pretty catchy. I usually always skip this scene, but it's with the fiery creatures, and they're surrounding Sarah, throwing their heads around and everything. They eventually get mad with Sarah, so they threaten to take Sarah's head off, but Sarah's able to escape them by throwing their heads off and climbing up a rope given by Hoggle. Sarah, being so happy, tries to kiss Hoggle, and Hoggle, trying to avoid it, leads them to almost falling into the Bog of Eternal Stench. They're able to avoid falling into it by falling on top of Ludo. They eventually run into a fox-looking creature named Sir Didymus, who guards the bridge. After a fight between Ludo and Didymus, they find out the way to get through the bridge is to simply ask for Didymus's permission, which he eventually grants. The bridge collapses, and Sarah almost falls through, but Ludo is able to call out and have rocks gather for Sarah to walk on. While walking through the forest once again, Hoggle offers Sarah the peach. Upon eating the peach, Sarah begins to hallucinate, so basically Hoggle drugs her. She starts imagining herself in a bubble, and a masquerade party begins to happen, where Jareth is following her throughout the party. We then get to our next song, which is called As the World Falls Down. Sarah is eventually able to escape this illusion by breaking a mirror, and she's able to break out of the spell, and wakes up in a junkyard and runs into Junk Lady. Sarah faintly remembers what she's looking for. The Junk Lady leads her to an illusion of her room, obviously trying to distract Sarah from her original mission. Sarah spots a copy of her Labyrinth book and is reminded of her search for Toby. Sarah eventually breaks out of the illusion, calling all her childhood toys junk. She's reunited with Ludo and Didymus, and they go through the gates of the castle to be met with a giant metal knight-looking monster that is being controlled by a few goblins. Hoggle once again appears to take control of the monster and saves the gang. Hoggle feels remorse and comes clean to Sarah about Jareth's plan, and Sarah eventually decides to forgive him. They finally arrive in the kingdom. Jareth sends out his army of goblins to fight and stop Sarah and others from finding Toby. Once again, Ludo's screams summon a bunch of rocks to defeat the army. Sarah decides to meet with Jareth alone because that's the way. We then get Jareth singing Within You to Sarah. And we get a cool staircase scene, and Sarah eventually spots Toby within this stair labyrinth and tries to get to Toby. Sarah decides to jump to get to Toby, and leading to Sarah and Jareth coming face to face. Sarah proceeds to recite what she needs to say in order to defeat Jareth. Jareth tries to offer her all her dreams to come true, but he has to rule over her. She says, "You have no power over me." Saying this allows him and the labyrinth to disappear, and she's brought back to her home with Toby back in his crib. Sarah gives her bear, Lancelot, to Toby, and she goes back to her room. While Sarah's in her room, she's looking into the mirror and sees Ludo and Didymus and Hoggle behind her, saying that she'll probably still need them at points of her life. This makes them so happy that eventually all the creatures from the labyrinth appear in her room, and a big party happens. The movie ends with Jareth, in owl form, watching the whole thing and flies away. So why did the labyrinth fail? Jim Henson, the same guy who created the Muppets, and executive producer George Lucas were inspired for the plot by Outside Over There by Mr. Surdock. The plot was so similar, however, that it almost got them into legal trouble. And they eventually settled it by giving credits to Sendok. The Labyrinth opened at number 8 in the box office, and by the second week dropped to number 13. By the end of its run in theaters, it only made just over half of its $25 million budget. The Labyrinth had mixed and positive reviews, some critics hating Jennifer Connelly's performance, and that overall, the look of the movie was really bland and didn't really come to life, criticizing the hard work Henson had put into the puppetry. Jim Henson was extremely disappointed in the movie's failure. His previous film, The Dark Crystal, had also failed due to its dark subject matter, isolating its audiences who were so used to Jim Henson's more colorful and light-hearted materials, such as The Muppets. He tried to make The Labyrinth into something the audience would like, adding in humor, puppetry, music, and a guest star, like what he did with The Muppets. His son Brian Henson even talked about his father's disappointment, saying, "But he knew he wanted to keep working in that world, that universe of fantasy, so he and Brian Fraud came up with Labyrinth as the next one. But I think he thought he was responding to what the world wanted. If you're going to do another thing like this, then bring in some of the funny, like The Muppets, and bring in some of the music, like The Muppets, and bring in a guest star, like what always worked on The Muppet Show. So we brought David Bowie in. We introduced the music, made the music a strong element, and make it funny. And he brought in Terry Jones. And he made it funnier. I think he felt, well, this is what I probably should have done with Dark Crystal, and then he was very surprised that it didn't do well. So how did it gain a cult following? Although The Labyrinth didn't do well in theaters, it found a lot of success on home video and later DVD. We can give some credit to Bowie for its success. The Goblin King was originally going to be another puppet, until Henson decided that he needed a star to lead the film. Henson considered musicians like Sting, Prince, Michael Jackson, and Mick Jagger before choosing Bowie. Even though the movie flopped, critics praised Bowie for his performance. New York Times wrote that Bowie was perfectly cast as the teasing, tempting seducer whom Sarah must both want and reject in order to learn the Labyrinth's lessons and his songs at a driving sensual appeal. It's been translated to various forms of media. The Goblins of Labyrinth, a book containing Brian Fraud's concept art. Even spin-off comics have emerged, like manga-style comics that are meant to be sequels, and these were really popular from 2006 to 2010. Brian Henson announced in 2018 that the Jim Henson Company was working on a stage show for London's West End. So what are my thoughts for the Labyrinth film? Well, growing up, I always really would catch the Labyrinth on TV, and it has a lot of nostalgia for me. Even though I didn't really understand what exactly was going on when I was younger, there was still enough good music and puppetry to keep me interested as a child. Of course, now watching it as an adult, it's really interesting to see the very dark themes that the Labyrinth covers, such as it serving almost as a coming-of-age story for Sarah. Sarah eventually has to let go of her selfish behavior and almost fantasies in order to focus and go through the labyrinth and find her baby brother. There's also a lot of dangers that she finds along the way, even with Jareth almost trying to seduce her. It's really dark, especially Jareth being so much older than Sarah during the movie. Despite its dark themes, I still very much love the movie today, and it's always going to hold a special place in my memories and my childhood. So, did I drink the Kool-Aid?
Oh yeah!
Heck yes. I'm really happy that this movie was part of my childhood. As weird as it is and everything, I just love being able to show this movie to friends or family that have never seen it before. So, of course, yeah, heck yeah, I'm chugging that Kool-Aid. Anyways, Thanks so much, guys, for joining me in this first video of this series. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something new today. Let me know in the comments if I missed out on anything, if this movie was also a big part of your childhood. And if you like what you saw, then please like and subscribe. And until next time, guys, see ya!